Okay, so I was going to do an oracle reading potentially out of a bag of rocks again. But I think I might just talk. I think I might just have a little talk session to get some things out and see what happens from there. I don't necessarily have a intent on what I want to talk about. Every time I try, I do kind of have an idea because I want to be able to talk about my issues with my family. But every time I try to talk about it, I end up getting distracted. I end up only getting little bits out. I end up really struggling to talk about certain things. And largely just in part because of a fear of what others will think, which isn't terribly reasonable. I mean, reasonable maybe, but not a good enough excuse, really, to keep from talking about the truth. They're not like, I mean, I care very much to be able to share myself and, you know, just on a personal level. But, like, I also, like, feel that I have messages to give the world, and I don't want to ever have my, you know, personal experiences or expression of my personal experiences or responses to my personal experiences to interfere with those things. And boy, does it get convoluted. I really do struggle with that. But these things have kept me not just secluded and isolated, but quiet for my whole life. And the older I get, the more that, like, all of this information comes to light, and I don't really know what to do with it. I do my best. I try to process it. I also try not to, like, I try to just take it onto myself. I don't try to, like, sit out here calling everybody out all the time, trying to make it some big issue. But a lot of that's just because that's what they tell me to do. And, you know, I'm not trying to start conflicts. I'm not trying to be involved in any drama. But I want justice. I want the truth to come out. I don't want people that take advantage to be able to continue to thrive that way. That's crazy. That's crazy. We need to see the world in a different light. And, like, how am I supporting that if I'm letting these people, not if I'm essentially I'm supporting them by not calling them out. I've been through a lot that I haven't told most people about, and the few people that I have told have ended up responding in a way that makes me not want to share those things with others. Especially when I've directly confronted people with my issues with them, so that I'm not just talking behind their backs. I don't want to be somebody that's just given to gossip. I don't want to be somebody that's having my own personal experience that, you know, can be validatable on a personal level and in my own emotions, but then, like, on a grander scheme, like, well, that was just my perception of things, that was just my personal experience, and then now I'm, you know, like, making people look bad because of my own personal experience with them, and, like, that doesn't apply to most people, and maybe these people are actually helpful to others, and I don't want to have my personal experience interfere with those types of things. And it's a struggle because, like, I deserve to be able to be honest, and I deserve to be able to be validated in my experiences. But at the same time, like, yeah, that's just a struggle. I mean, if somebody assaulted me, and I'm the only person they've ever assaulted, and they've gone on to be a good person to other people, one, that ends up invalidating me, you know, just for the fact that I can't even share those things without people being like, are you sure? Because they're a really good person this other way. they're really decent. Like, it's almost like the only time I get to share my truth about things is if a large amount of other people also agree. But I've also experienced in my life that even when a large amount of people also do agree, that it doesn't matter because that person has a certain amount of power, that person has a certain amount of influence. What am I going to do? There's a statute of limitations on certain things, or, you know, I don't have the money to be able to afford a lawyer this way in that regard in order to do these things, so we kind of all just have to deal with it. That's why I'm not pursuing things a certain way. I will if I have to. I'm very close to pursuing that way in different regards. There's certain people that have fucked me over at this point where it's like, no, you don't get to fuck me over like that. Especially because you're fucking other people over. Like, I'm not going to sit around and allow that. I ain't got anything better to do than to make sure that you're held accountable to your fucking actions. I'm getting really tired of people thinking that they can just get away with things, especially when, like, oh, your family's robbed you? Okay, well then I'm just going to do the same, because if your own family can do it, then of course I can get away with it. Like, you're about to get yourself caught up in some serious shit. I'm not concerned about, like, I don't have a record. I'm not doing anything wrong. The only reason that I would end up in prison or jail for bringing things to the light is because somebody else has money and the system is corrupt. And you know what? I'm willing to take that, because I don't think these things are going to be able to hold up that way. I don't give a fuck. I believe in karma, and I believe that these things have gone on long enough. I also believe that I'm protected by the divine hand of God, and that no matter what happens to me, I will be protected and will end up better on the other side for it. Me, personally. Like, things will work out better on the other side. So I want to pursue things with integrity. I want to pursue things with, you know, a sense of justice and what is right, and not really concern myself with what happens to me in the process, because it's more important that certain things are exposed and brought to the light. You know, I don't want to get all frustrated and start speaking in my emotions. Obviously, I'm not in a court of law. What I say here is going to come from my own bias, my own personal experience. There is going to be some sort of emotional attachment to it. I have every right to. But I'm not trying to get into a space where I'm calling people out and trying to make people look bad, and then somebody hears it and happens to be like, oh, you know, and feel some type of way. I want to make sure that I'm being as accurate as possible, as I can be, you know. Okay, so like my parents, my mom and my stepdad essentially lived off of my real dad's life insurance for the first, you know, however long that I was growing up. It's at least how they were able to get into the house that they got into and get themselves into the position that they were able to get to. My stepdad started working for my mom's dad, so he was always working, but my mom wasn't working. But of course, this was back in the early 90s when one person could work 40 hours a week, and that would maintain sufficient living for an entire family. So I don't want to discredit those things. My stepdad has always worked. My mom started working when I was about 13, and has been working ever since, on and off, full-time or part-time. I think she struggles with it, especially as she gets older now, because she, you know, there's the idea of like, I'm an old woman. There's no reason I should be working like this. But she also, like, you know, she went back to school to graduate high school. My stepdad never graduated high school, so without a proper education and without like a really good work ethic, you know, she can only get jobs at gas stations. And I mean, I don't really know. She was working at a gas station, really like not ideal hours, that was like 40 minutes away from their house. for an extended period of time. I don't know why she didn't try to get a job closer to home. I don't know if she's just not terribly resourceful. I don't really understand it. The impression that I got was that, like, her boss wasn't that great. The job wasn't doing anything for her. It was probably costing money, actually, to work there. I really don't know exactly what was going on in that situation, but that's the only job I know of her working in the past years. When I was 13, she had started working back at the factory she worked at prior to us being born, and she worked there for years. My brother worked there for a time. That was in Bristol, Wisconsin. Yeah, I don't know exactly what happened with that job, why she ended up starting working at a gas station. I think she left that job under the impression that she wasn't going to have to continue to work, or that my dad picked up another different job, I think, in order to keep her from having to work. She just doesn't want to work. And my stepdad's been working my entire life, and covering everything for her. And I think it just got to the point where it still wasn't affording living. Most people have to work at this point, have to have some sort of income, like every adult. Unfortunately, we don't live in times, and it's because of their generation, to be clear. They did it to themselves, so the fact that they don't, they expect their children to be far more resourceful than they've been. Like, I don't know how my family does it. I don't know, because I don't think my sister-in-laws work either. My brothers both work, but they're machinists. My oldest brother has been doing it for an incredibly long time, and I imagine he's making pretty good money that way. They also have 7 and 8 kids apiece, so I don't really know how they maintain their homeschool lifestyle when they're very much against living off of the government. Social Security is living off of the government. Any sort of government benefits, that's living off of the government. I haven't ever received any of those things. Yet I'm considered the one that's not resourceful, and the one that's lazy, and the one that, is willing to do anything for money when my mom found a way to make herself the beneficiary of all of my real dad's mom's assets and property and everything upon her passing. My grandma had me in her will, and suddenly my mom, and it's weird because, like, before my parents moved in with my grandma, because they couldn't afford their house multiple times over, they kept losing their housing because my mom doesn't want to work, and nothing my dad can do because he's not college, he's not educated, he didn't even finish high school, so, like, they don't make much money. They don't know how to manage their money for shit at all. They mismanage their money constantly. They're not going to quit smoking pot to save money. They're not going to quit, spending money, to drive an hour to church and to work and to these different types of things. They're not resourceful people, unfortunately for them. And apparently, unfortunately for everybody else, because their idea of being resourceful is manipulating systems in order to benefit from them and robbing their children, specifically me. Before my parents moved in with my grandma, I was spending time with my grandma. I was talking to her consistently. I was building a good relationship with her. We had been slightly estranged from her most of my life. Can't really say why, but as an adult, I started taking the opportunity to have a good relationship with both her and my uncle. I visited them multiple times, and then I was living out of the state prior to my parents moving in with her, and during that whole time, I was, writing her messages. I would call her and talk with her. I was sending her art, making, different mail, and we built a really good relationship. I went and visited her at one point, even afterwards, and even when I was still married, I was talking about my issues with my family and how she was actually one of the only people at the time who had not encouraged me, but supported my becoming estranged from my family. it took years for me to really work that out and process that out, but she was always in total support of that. She let me know that she didn't, ever really like my stepdad or trust him. She had issues, with my parents about things, but she never felt like it was her right to say anything about those things or do anything about those things. She wasn't trying to judge them. She wasn't trying to shit on them. They were my parents, and we were her, she passed away now, but like we were her son who had passed away's children. So like she very much wanted a relationship with us. She didn't want to mess that up at all by having a bad relationship with my parents. But I think she was hurt very deeply by having lost my dad when I was just a baby. And, she just did what she could to try to maintain some type of relationship with us, but kept a distance because she didn't trust my parents. She let me know that outright. She didn't just randomly tell me that. I came to her and started talking to her about my issues with my family, and she validated that for me, saying that she also agreed and felt those ways, and that's why she stayed estranged. However, she loved my mom because my mom was her son's, ex-wife, past wife, widow, and we were her grandchildren, and she was our mother, and, she loved my mom and wanted to care for my mom as much and wanted to just care for the family. She didn't want any issues. She didn't want any drama. She tried very hard to stay out of those things. My grandma was like a no bullshit type of person who really didn't like drama. She isolated quite often because she didn't want to deal with people's bullshit. She loved people. The people that were close to her, she loved very much. She cared for very much. She had a few close friends and stuff, and everybody kept passing in her life, and that's when I became close to her, and, she didn't have a problem sharing with me her honest feelings, but she was, she wasn't a dick about it. Like, she, was understanding and willing to balance things out. She was actually quite mature, and reasonable and understanding. And interestingly enough, prior to my parents moving in with her, she also was not given to religion and had an issue with my parents being so religious. She didn't judge them being religious, but she judged the way that they insisted upon that religion from everybody else in different ways. That was something she wasn't comfortable with. And she was very liberal, prior to my parents moving in. But then my parents moved in, and according to the paperwork, the same exact year, now just the year prior, she was supporting me being estranged from my family. I was having active relationship with her, and we were very close. And, she would tell me that, I contacted her more than anyone, and that she really appreciated that. So I try to make a point to keep up on that. But then I let her know, even when my parents moved in, that, like, I was probably going to have to pull away a bit because I really was struggling with my relationship with my family, and she told me that she understood. But then within the same year that my parents moved in, suddenly I had been in my grandmother's will, which I didn't know to what extent. We never talked about those things. My grandma told me that she had gotten sick back, in 2014, 2015 or so. It was probably even around 2012, 2013. She started getting sick, and she had talked to me about different things, but I never considered myself being in her will that way. I guess there might have been an assumption. It's not something I ever thought about, really. I didn't want to think about my grandma dying, honestly. And it wasn't something that I sat there and bet on or anything like that, but I guess that there could have been some sort of assumption that because me and my brothers were her only actual family, that were, in relationship with her, that we would receive something when she died, I guess. I didn't really think about it. I think I assumed that maybe my uncle had been in her will, but then he passed away before she did. And so I assumed that everything that was his was actually left to her. And then she had to sort all that out. And I remember that being a big mess for a time. It was really hard for her. She'd already lost my dad, so to lose both of her sons prior to her death was not an easy thing to deal with. And then her daughter has been estranged from her for quite such a long time. So even though I have two cousins that are my aunt's daughters, they were always estranged from my grandmother. And they live in California, or at least lived in California. I think they're both married now, my cousins, Brittany and Brianna. And I only met them one time. I think I met my Aunt Dee Dee twice. But I remember just the one time. She was never really close with the family. Apparently her and my mom would talk. But it was almost like this thing where, like, my Aunt Dee Dee didn't get along with her mom. And my mom also had this weird thing against my grandma. I don't know the details of that. But I know my mom never, like, insisted upon a relationship with my grandma for us, which is why we were always slightly estranged. The fact that she was my dead dad's mom kind of insisted that we have some sort of relationship with her. But his dad, they were separated. My real dad's parents were separated, and his dad got remarried, prior to me ever being around. And they kind of always, they were in Florida, and they kind of also, we talked to them a couple times a year, but always somewhat distant too. So it was just like there was always this weird estrangement between my real dad's family and myself. I assume because my dad was dead and my mom got remarried when I was 2, so we were closer to my stepdad's family. There was not really a reason. I mean, I personally would have really appreciated learning more about my dad's family, learning and understanding more about this man who was never there in my life. That would have been helpful to me. But my mom just kind of doubled down on us being close to her family, which have their own issues. Both of her parents were also divorced and remarried, and there was just a lot always going on. But the year that my parents moved in with my grandma, they moved in because they kept losing their homes. They couldn't afford shit. So my dad's mom, my real dad's mom, let my mom and her husband, my stepdad, move into her home. And my parents made it seem like it was them moving in order to help my grandma out. But at the time, my grandma was quite responsible for herself. She wasn't and my mom swears that it's because my grandma was, getting sick and needed help around the house. And she had had help before. She had had a younger couple that had stayed with her, and they were extremely helpful. So, an older, aging, single woman, could definitely benefit from having people around, for sure. But I really don't think, personally, that she, was asking my parents for help, and then they were like, you know what, we'll just move in. Because, how ironic would the timing be that right when my grandma starts needing help from my parents also happen to lose their last house and not be able to afford to live anywhere. The impression that I get is that my parents had to move into her home. She was the only person they had to ask for help. They reached out for help. They didn't want to give help from her because they had these relationship issues with her, but because she was the type of person that she was, she let them stay with her. She made it work. She was, she could handle herself, or so she thought, with them. And, my stepdad was renovating the house and making things a little nicer around and stuff like that. So that was the benefit. She could kind of direct my stepdad to do different things, and was getting the benefit of the house being in better shape for her, and so that she could be more comfortable and stuff while they were there. I don't get the impression that they had a great relationship that whole time, personally. Of course, this is during the time that I've been mostly estranged from the family, so I don't really know what happened, but I do find it so peculiar that not even 12 months after my grandma's supporting me becoming estranged from the family, talking about how she totally understands and wasn't, she didn't judge me for having the she understood, and also had issues with my parents. And at that point, I still wasn't even fully aware of the ways that they were taking advantage, and it had always been taking advantage of me. But what little bit I did understand and know, I could talk to my grandma about, and she was understanding and in agreement about it. So it's just crazy to me that so quickly after my parents move in, suddenly, according to the paperwork, my I was written entirely out of the will for being estranged from my family, which is so crazy because my grandma had been mostly estranged from our family my entire life. If anybody understood why I wanted to be estranged from my family, it was my grandma. Yet apparently, according to my mom, my grandma was so upset that I was estranged from the family that she wrote me entirely out of the will and wrote my mom in my place. So my mom received all of my inheritance from my grandmother, including the house, which, according to my mom, because she wouldn't send me the actual will, she only sent me bullshit paperwork that has obviously been manipulated. But according to her, according to the will, it says that because my parents were living in the house at the time that my grandma died, that they would be allowed to stay there until they found somewhere else to live or until they passed away, whichever came first. But of course, I never got to see that paperwork. I also never got to see my grandmother's death certificate. I also never got to see any of the proof of why things were handled the way that they were handled. But my mom, by her own admittance to me, explained that my grandma had started to get sick, that her medication seemed to be making her ill, that it was that she was given the wrong medication. They weren't diagnosing it the right way. They weren't prescribing it the right way. So my mom had to start managing her medication. But weirdly enough, even when my mom's explaining that, she tells me that my grandma's medication had gotten her to the point where my grandma was having falls and being delirious and was injuring herself in these falls, and ended up having to get a hospital bed shortly before she passed away. And it's just so crazy because this is when my mom is managing her medications. So how is it that her medications are being mismanaged? By my mom's own admittance, when my mom was the caregiver. My mom's not a fucking caregiver, to be clear. She was there when her cousin was dying too. It's so crazy. My mom was never a caregiver prior to me literally becoming a certified caregiver, which I am and have been. But when I became a certified caregiver was when my mom started these rumors that I was living on the street prostituting for money, that I was doing heroin. No, she started that rumor earlier. You're right. That was a rumor that she swears she never said anything like that, even though my whole family became under the impression that I was on drugs, that I've never even been near physically that way. But she loves my sister-in-law who literally was on heroin. That's fine. That's fine. But when I was supposedly on heroin and prostituting myself on the streets for money in order to survive, none of my family ever reached out. Nobody ever wanted to make sure that my mental health was okay. Nobody was ever there for me, trying to support me, trying to get me out of that situation. And just the timing of things, so interesting. So interesting. You know, because now my parents have this home. And like, according to my mom, what she told me when my grandma passed away was that she had an inheritance in me. What she told me right away before she sent me paperwork later on, because I insisted upon it, telling her that my lawyer was going to get involved if she didn't send me the paperwork. Prior to that, I had talked to her for the first time in 3 years, maybe, after my grandma's passing, and she let me know that my grandma actually had left me a little bit of money, which is crazy because according to the paperwork that my mom sent, I was completely written out and didn't receive anything. I had signed off on all this shit to not receive any of this, okay? But according to my mom on the phone, when I talked to her for the first time after my grandma's passing, my mom told me that my grandma had left me $2,000, but they couldn't get a hold of me, which is fucking bullshit because my mom was sending me emails to my email. Regardless of the fact that I wasn't responding, sometimes I did respond. She knew that that was a way she could get a hold of me. She didn't ever try to get a hold of me about any of these things. She didn't call me. She didn't write me. She didn't do any of this stuff. If there's some sort of paperwork somewhere that says otherwise, it's because she is creating false paperwork. And I could show you the paperwork that she sent me and how illegitimate it is. I'll get into that in a second. But she tells me that my grandma left me $2,000, but because they couldn't get a hold of me, it was just transferred into my mom's personal account, which isn't how the fuck this shit works. That's not legally how something works when it comes to somebody's will. That's not how it works. That's not, it would go to fucking back to the bank before it would just go to some random member of the family just because they claim it. That's not how it works. There would have had to have been some type of manipulation on my mom's part for her to receive that period. There's no way that that isn't the case. None. However, according to my mother, because my grandma had left just the $2,000 and the house in my name, but it's between me and my brothers, and in the will, apparently, which I was never allowed to see, my parents get to live there and stay there until they die. Or find another place to live, which of course they're not going to fucking do because they can't afford fucking anything else to live. So they're just going to live there until they die, and then we get the house. Meanwhile, I'm fucking homeless at this time, which is why my grandma was giving me the things that she was giving me. She already knew that I had been homeless multiple times and that I was trying to stay estranged from my family because of the issues that I had with them. And she supported that. And she was trying to help me out. And my mom was jealous about that. My mom didn't like that because she didn't like my grandma and because she doesn't like me. And she didn't like that we had a relationship. And she didn't understand why I would receive something from my grandma that she wasn't receiving. Because I was my grandma's actual grandmother, a grandchild. And my mom is just her dead son's ex-wife now, but who has been married to somebody else this entire time. Yes, that's her grandchildren's mother. Yes, there's those things. That's why my grandma let my mom stay with her. But I was actual kin. I'm an actual heir of my grandmother's. But apparently my grandma just wrote me out of the will, and wrote my mom into it to be the beneficiary of all of these things. Because my mom's super trustworthy with money, always has proven to be that. They literally keep losing their houses, and that's the reason they were living with my grandmother. But no, my mom is definitely to be trusted with all these things. In fact, she probably received the house from my grandma because my grandma felt so bad that she wasn't able to survive at fucking 65 years old. I digress. So my mom sends me $2,000 out of her personal account. And that's supposed to just cover everything, and that's supposed to be the end of it. And now she'll never have to hear anything about it. I go up north. I spend that money to go up north and to stay with my parents because I want to find out what's going on. I want to get into that paperwork. I want to see the house. I want to see what's going on. I want to watch my family and how they interact, and I want to see what the fuck I can figure out. Granted, I can't afford a lawyer even with that $2,000. So I just wanted to see what I can figure out for myself in hopes that I could figure something out for myself. The time that I was there, in a short period of time that I got there, suddenly my dog gets sick with a vicious cancer that comes out of nowhere and literally destroys her fucking body with a giant fucking tumor that was so large it was moving her bones inside of her body. So she has to be put to sleep. And my mom feels so terrible about it. But the whole time, she keeps giving me this side eye because she wants to see how I'm responding to it. Did it get her? Did it hurt her? Have I broken her down yet? I was supposed to kill myself my entire life. My stepdad literally told me when he found out that I was cutting myself that I was an idiot for cutting myself this way, and that any idiot would know to go down the street, not across it, if I was really trying to kill myself, and that I was just begging for attention. I kept my shit covered. The only reason they even found out that I was cutting myself was because he grabbed my arm while he was arguing with me, and I winced about it. And he pulled my sleeve down and saw that I was cutting myself, claimed that I was doing it for their attention, and then explained how to actually kill myself to be successful. That was the shit I was dealing with growing up for my family. Okay, and you know, but they didn't, they wanted me to survive. They've always wanted me to be healthy and secure and financially stable. They weren't trying to sell me off to different people. They were never trying to do those things. They wouldn't do anything like that. Steal my inheritance? That's crazy. Not that I ever saw my inheritance from my dad. They lived off of the Social Security, and then when I was 18 and actually received that, they insisted I buy a car and then asked for the rest of it to get them out of debt. And then it didn't get them out of debt. They still ended up losing the house, so they paid me back $200 a month for 10 years in order to pay back what they had taken from me. And they didn't even pay all of that back, and I didn't give a fuck because they were just using it against me to keep a relationship with me and control me, and I didn't want that. So I kept fighting them about it, and they kept insisting that they were trying to do the right thing by paying me back this money that they had taken. Right? On top of it, they were taking my tax returns from the time I was 14 until I was 18. They told me that I didn't get tax returns until I was 18. But I was working full time at 15 At 16, I started working 2 jobs. At 17, I was working 2 jobs. And then at 18, I started working just 1 job. But I was working full time that entire time. Plus, I was working overtime. I was being homeschooled. All I did was work. All I did was work. And they took all of that money. They took it all. They've never robbed me. They've never taken anything from me. They took $20,000 after that so that I couldn't go to college. And mind you, they had already been upset because when I was supposed to receive that money, I wanted to go to art college. And they didn't want me to go to receive liberal colleging. They didn't want me to have a liberal education. They wanted me to go to Christian school, to a Christian college, and I didn't want to go to a Christian college. And then suddenly they need all this money and I don't get to afford to go to college. Cool. Okay. So after all of that, that's, and at that point too, I was 18, so they weren't going to be receiving Social Security for me anymore, which I guarantee they were living off of forever. And now my brothers were full grown too. So as soon as they stopped receiving Social Security from my brothers, they had to start coming down harder on me and taking my tax returns. And as soon as I got 18, they couldn't take any of those things. They couldn't do any of that. So now they're struggling with money. Now my mom has to really keep working, and they're having all these hard times, and it's all my fault probably, because I wasn't still paying. I wasn't worth anything to them anymore. So then I become estranged from my family. Not even because of the fucking money. I become estranged from my family because I was in such an abusive relationship for a year's time with a man that I wasn't even romantically involved with fully. It was like a total psychological operation. But he was drugging me and abusing me for a period of time. And there were so many different things that I had just made allowances for. I wasn't fighting him against it. I was just receiving all of this abuse. And I got out of that situation, ended up back at my parents' house because I didn't know where else to go, and was absolutely out of my mind, fucked up, because I could not understand why I had made all those allowances, why I would be in such a situation. I wasn't even blaming that dude. I wasn't blaming anybody. I was trying to understand myself, why I would let myself into those types of situations. And then I realized that I'd been groomed a lot growing up into that type of behavior, especially with the sexual abuse coming from my brother. My brother was my best friend growing up. I still don't take up an issue with my brother, but he did sexually assault me the majority of my life until I was 18. He's 5 years older than me, and I just groomed me that entire time for his type of abuse. There were times that I was able to resist. There were times that I would tell him no. There were different types of things. As I got older and he started drinking, it started getting more aggressive. Not the actual abuse. I was limiting myself from it, but he would try things, and I would have to stay away from him. But he was also my best friend, so I was fucked up, and I realized at that point that was why I was fucked up, because my closest friend and confidant was somebody who was actively abusing me most of my life. Well, that can't be healthy. So I talked to him about it, and I explained to him, I need to step away from having any sort of relationship with you for a time, which my parents had already done. Back when my brother first started getting really popular and doing music and becoming a very popular musician, I wasn't allowed to talk to him for 2 years because he was satanically indoctrinating me. That's a big thing for my family, because I wasn't allowed to talk to my nieces or nephews of my oldest brother for a couple years, for the same reason. So this is just some bullshit my family does. Meanwhile, while they're doing coke and smoking pot, not constantly, and gossiping about everybody here and there, and fucking robbing people and potentially murdering people. But I digress. So I talked to my brother. I explained to him that that's why I can't have a relationship with him at the time, and he's fine with it. He doesn't like it. He doesn't want me talking about these things openly and publicly because he's quite ashamed. But he understands, and he's trying to be understanding for me and trying to be kind to me because he doesn't want me talking about those things. But he gave me more respect than anybody did. My mom finds out that I'm not talking to my brother, and she takes up a really big issue with that. She tells me I'm tearing the family apart for the second time. Me moving out of their house when I was 20 years old tore the family apart the first time. She told me I took a spoke out of the wheel, and now the wheel couldn't run, and that was my fault, and I was destroying the family. So now this is the second time I've destroyed the family, because now I'm deciding that I don't want to talk to my brother for a period of time while I practice some healing. I had already tried to go to therapy back when I lived with my parents, and she told me that I couldn't go to therapy unless it was their idea of Christian therapy, unless it was somebody that they were okay with, and I didn't want to go through who they thought was okay with. And I didn't want to go to Christian therapy. I had religious abuse. I wanted to go to somebody I felt safe with, that I could actually talk about sexual abuse with, and my own issues with my own sexuality, including my sex addiction, my porn addiction. I didn't feel comfortable talking about those things with a Christian. My parents weren't comfortable with me getting therapy unless it was through a Christian, because everything else is satanic indoctrination. So now I'm just a full-blown Satanist, right? Because I'm going to therapy and I'm trying to get help, and I'm deciding that I don't really want a relationship with my brother for this time. And because I don't want a relationship with my brother, I can't have a relationship with anybody else. My mom takes up such an issue with that she literally blocks me from having a relationship with anybody else in the family. Mostly probably out of fear, because I start talking about these things and she doesn't want me to tell everybody else, just outside of the family or close friends of the family, that I'd been sexually assaulted my entire life. My brother could admit it. My brother's admitted it multiple times to me. He just doesn't want me coming out with it in public, right? Which I get. I'm not trying to hold it against my brother. Even when we were being raised, he had also been sexually assaulted. He was taking those things out on me. I was making allowances for it. I'm not saying that it's okay, but I don't think that he's the vicious predator that it would be made out to be if these things were just ran through publicly the way that somebody would take them. That's why I try very hard to express things the way that I do. However, he did sexually assault me most of my life, and I wasn't the only one he was doing it to. I was one of maybe a dozen people that he sexually assaulted as we were growing up. I blame my mom for those things because she knew about it happening, and instead of trying at all to keep him from being that way, she just tried to hide it all. She just tried to convince everybody that he was doing it to that that's just how Timmy is. That's just how it is. That's fine. That's just how it is. That's just what boys do. Tim just has his dick out all the time and makes people touch it and tries to touch other people's genitals. It's fine. That's just what happens. She was the adult in the situation. And she told me when I was growing up that the reason that she didn't know how to handle those things, or the reason that she could understand where I was coming from, those different types of things, was because she had been sexually assaulted by her dad's friends. But then when I'm an adult, she swears that never happened, and her dad is a saint, and there was never any sort of abuse that she ever experienced, and she's super mentally healthy, and none of those things ever happened, and I'm the one that's crazy, and I'm just making stuff up. You could ask her siblings. My mom is not a mentally stable person. Has not been known for that, ever. But I'm the one that's crazy. I'm the one that's out here on drugs. I'm the one prostituting for money. So I become estranged from them. Okay? And my mom is not happy about that. She's not okay with that, especially because I do start to be honest about my experiences with my family. And there are people watching and listening and questioning, and she doesn't like that, and she's not okay with that, and she's not going to come to terms with that. So she comes up with all of these lies and all of this gossip about my mental health and where I was. Yeah, my mental health wasn't great. I was trying to kill myself from the time I was 8 years old. I have been hospitalized for my mental health. I don't have a problem talking about those things. I have done the work to ensure that I'm as healthy as I possibly can be. But those things were largely the effect of my childhood, not me just being mentally unstable. Psychopathy, on the other hand, sociopathy, on the other hand, not even sociopathy, because that tends to be a lot more triggered than it is just natural. But the psychopathy, that's actual mental illness. Okay, having really bad depression and anxiety because of PTSD, that's the only thing I've ever been diagnosed with, by the way. I asked for personality disorder testing. I asked for testing for autism, for testing for schizophrenia. I asked for those things, and my therapist never recommended it. I could not get testing for those things through my therapist because they believed wholeheartedly that my diagnosis was accurate, that I had CPTSD with generalized anxiety disorder and dysthymia, a long-term subtle depression disorder from the PTSD. They were all tied in together. Also, I was diagnosed with ADHD. Those things those things come with a lot of different issues, but I've never been diagnosed with any sort of delusional disorder, with any sort of incapacity of self. And at this point, it's hard for me to even get those diagnoses diagnoses validated, not the ADHD. I'm obviously a little wired, but even the depression and anxiety have significantly been managed to a degree where I still have generalized anxiety disorder triggered by the CPTSD. I will always have those things, but I am too well to be able to receive even the care that I received before. I couldn't just go get hospitalized right now, like, because I don't have the needs for those things. I'm not out of my fucking mind. I'm also not on drugs. Piss test me all you want. You're not even going to find pot in my system because I haven't been doing anything at all. I guarantee you piss test me in comparison to the rest of my family, and you're going to find out some information. You're going to find out who's lying and who's not. You're going to find out who really is, who they really say that they are, and who isn't. Go into the paperwork. I don't have a problem being audited for every single job I've had, for every single place I've lived, for every single move that I've made, for every single bill that I have paid or haven't paid in the last, 15 years. I'm 35. So go from the time I was technically an adult. 15, 17 years. Go back as far as you need. Go back till I was 15. Take the last 20 years, audit me for all of it, and audit my parents for the same amount of things. Find out who's lying. Find out who's been stealing. Find out who's really been manipulating things. The shit gets so old. And I'm one person, out here without a family, out here without a partner, out here without any support, trying to figure out what to do about these things. The best I've had this whole time is just trying my best to survive, doing whatever I can to try to be as decent of a person as possible. Does that always hold up in a court of law? Yeah, that's why I try to be the person I am. And would like to continue to be, and would like even better to be, is in order to ensure that these systems actually are just and actually are finding the truth of things and actually are taking care of the people that have been, wrongfully accused, victimized, like put in these different types of situations, and to stop supporting those who would be willing to rob, cheat, lie, and steal. Like, the timing even of things. There's no way this many lies can keep up for much longer. I mean, this has been crazy. And it's very important that I talk about these things and that I push this energy for these things so that it can come to a head. If I have to go to court and stand out and have all of everything I've ever posted on social media, every email I've ever sent, every text I've ever sent, all of it, if all of it has to come out, I am okay with that. No, there's plenty that I am not proud of. There's plenty I'd be quite embarrassed about. There's plenty I don't want people to know, but I am okay accepting those things and standing in a genuineness with those things, especially if it means actual justice. All I ask is that the same things that are done to me are done to those accusing me. That the same things that are done to me, the same things that I'm accusing others of, can be held against me as well. All of it, full circle. I'm fine with that. I am not afraid of that whatsoever, at all. I'll get everybody involved. I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid to see these people and to talk to these people. I've just been having to protect myself. So I stay away. I stay isolated. I can't trust even the people that I've considered the closest. My closest friends are also affiliated with my family. And when I'm around them and suddenly my IDs are getting stolen and my money is getting stolen and everything starts falling into weird places, I can't trust you. I'm sorry. Give me a reason to. That's the position I'm in. Fucking strangers meet me for 3 days, take me out on dates, and wonder why I don't just trust them innately. Because I'm not a dumbass. Because the people that have been closest to me have betrayed me harder than I've ever seen most betrayals. So no, I'm not just going to freely trust people. I don't need to. I trust myself. I got that going for me. That's the best I got. That's fine. I'm good. I'm not going to sit here and keep setting myself up for failure. And anybody that comes at me is going to have me coming back at them. Only I'm going to do it responsibly. I'm not going to sit here and be, underhanded about things. I'll watch my tongue. I do have a hard time with it. I'm learning, okay? I'm not always the most mature or responsible about those things. And I know that can get me in trouble. I'm not trying to deal with that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you ask anybody who knows me, anybody who isn't trying to come against me in a court of law in order to protect themselves, anybody who I don't have that type of thing going on with, but anybody that's worked with me, anybody that's lived with me, anybody that's done these things, they'll tell you that despite all the bullshit, I have a good heart. I've been a decent person. I've been compassionate. I've been helpful. I don't just screw people over. The people that feel screwed over by me are people that screwed me over first. And then I left. And people feel really hurt by that when they can't control me anymore, when they can't keep stealing from me, when they can't keep manipulating me, when they can't potentially put me in an extremely toxic and dangerous situation. Yeah, people don't like that. But I've taken care of my shit. I've taken my licks. I've dealt with my karma. I've balanced things out. I'm not afraid of the truth coming out about things. No, I'm not a perfect person. No, there's plenty about me to judge. I'm okay with that. That's what's real. But I'm not living a lie, so I don't have to be afraid of the truth coming out. The paperwork that my mom sent me when I told her that I was going to get that my lawyer was going to contact her in order to get it, or she could just send it to me. She sent me screenshots or whatever, pictures that she had taken of the paperwork. And the paperwork that she sent me was in regards to the will, but wasn't the actual will. And in it, it talked about how, you know, she had become the beneficiary because I was written out of the will. But every single time that it used my name in this official government paperwork and documentation of official government issued orders in regards to somebody's will after they have passed away, those aren't things you can just change because that person is no longer there to change them. Those things stand for what they stand for. But all of the paperwork that I got sent to me, anytime that my name was used on that paperwork, it was in a different font. And instead of it being my official legal name, it was a nickname. It was a shortened version of my government name with my middle name and my last name. Not my official government full name. A nickname with my middle name. My brothers had their full official government names on those documents, but I didn't. Almost as if somebody created a different identity in order to sign off on those things. My name was never even my full actual government name. It was this shortened nickname. In different font, by the way. They weren't even well done. Whatever lawyer you paid out of the inheritance to do that paperwork wasn't even good at his job. In fact, he was so not good at his job and only cared about money, which is why he was willing to do it in the first place. To be clear, the only type of lawyer willing to do those types of things is somebody that cares about money more than they care about justice or integrity. Yeah, he also didn't care about your ass. He wasn't trying to protect you guys. He was just trying to make money. And if I was willing to offer him more, he was willing to turn his back right on y'all. Because I talked to him. And he validated everything I needed validated. But only because he liked me. Only because he was so amazed at the drama. He couldn't believe it. That was good drama. And the fact I happened to still be alive and come back around and start talking to him blew his mind. He loved it. So he offered me, to help me out, to come against you guys if I just had the right amount of money. Well, that's not somebody I really want to work with, to be honest. Rather just work with the divine and let God figure it out. And he is. They are. God is figuring it out on my behalf, on the behalf of my grandmother, on the behalf of my father, on the behalf of my uncle, on the behalf of everybody who's been unjustly robbed in this situation. Yeah, the divine's got it. I trust in that. I'm good on that. But I do need to speak on these things. I do need to be honest so that people know where I'm coming from, so that anybody that happens to be involved in this can have an awareness of why I'm where I'm at, why I move the way that I move. I'm not scared of having to protect myself. I am protected. all of those people that passed away that got robbed, they're behind me. They got me. I talked to those people. I'm not scared of what's going to happen. I rest assured that good things are coming to good people, and that your sin will find you out, that what's been done in the dark will come to the light, and that wheel is turning as we speak. So, I gotta pee. I gotta take care of some things with my job. I just wanted to get this out and take a little time to get this out. Sorry if I'm being a dick. These things tend to get to me, but I'm working that out as well. That's a big point of being able to talk about these things, is so that I have talked about them. Now there's proof of what I feel, so if I say something else and make up some other story like I'm so known for, you can hold this against me. Okay? Okay? This is what I've been told to do, so this is what I'm doing, and this is what I've done, and this is where I'm at, and yeah. I'll probably make a video that's actually worth watching after this, but just need to get that all out. All right, see ya.